Hello everyone, welcome to episode 51 of Driver Suit Blog Radio, the final episode of 2022. As always, I'm your host, David G. Firestone. I'm happy to announce that Driver Suit Blog Radio will be returning for 2023. I'm looking forward to it. And our last episode of the year is a Wheel Reviews episode that features a NASCAR movie that I don't know how people don't talk about it all that much. Now, produced and released by MGM in 1968, Speedway is a musical NASCAR movie starring Elvis. Yes, that Elvis. Yes, there is a movie that features Elvis Presely as a NASCAR driver. Take a minute, let that sink in, I'll wait. Okay, we good? Now let's talk about the movie itself. Now, the lead roles in the movie were first offered to Sonny and Cher prior to their first movie, Good Times, being released. When Good Times wound up losing $200,000 at the box office, the lead was then offered to Elvis and Nancy Sinatra. Now, a major problem with the movie is that it follows the Elvis movie formula, which had been successful but had worn itself out by that point. Also, after his death, you could argue that the movie could be seen as somewhat biographical, but I'll get to that in a little bit. So Elvis plays Steve Grayson, a successful and generous NASCAR driver who drives for Kenny Donford, who is a manager and team owner with a severe gambling habit. He often gambles away Grayson's winnings. This leads to non-payment of back taxes on Grayson's part, and IRS agent Susan Jacks, played by Nancy Sinatra, has been sent to investigate. Grayson eventually finds out that Donford had gambled away all his money. The two part ways. Grayson gets his winning ways back. He figures out a way to pay his taxes back, and then Grayson and Jacks begin a relationship while preparing for the big race, which he wins. You know, your typical happy ending sports movie from the 60s. And the movie itself is actually very well produced. It does have a lot of top NASCAR stars of the year, including Richard Petty, Buddy Baker, Cale Yarborough, Dick Hutcherson, Tiny Lund, G.C. Spencer, and Roy Main. Much of the movie was shot at Charlotte Motor Speedway, and a lot of actual race footage was used. For the most part, Elvis gives a good performance, and Elvis and Nancy Sinatra have really good chemistry here. The musical numbers are good. The plot is very easy to follow, and the characters are very likable. The special effects for the time are good and look very realistic. And I also like the pacing of the movie and the fact that there's a decent amount of both racing action and character development, and the mix is just about perfect, which in a lot of movies is not easy to do. Now, as much as I did like this movie, I do have some issues with it. Both Elvis and Sinatra have musical roles. Given their talent, they do well, but they seem very out of place given the time and setting of the movie. And during the drive-in sequences, when they show close-ups of Elvis in the car, he has this really weird, unemotional, blank look on his face, which looks really odd. And even in instances where he's competing for the lead or spins out, he never breaks the emotionless face. It looks really weird, and it looks almost like he's just there, like he doesn't really care about what's going on around him. I have another issue with this movie, and this might be just an issue for me. And this is by no stretch of the imagination an isolated incident, but it's clear that many of the outdoor sequences are clearly shot in a soundstage. Even though there's really no reason for them to be shot in a soundstage, they make it look very obvious, and it looks really off. But now we have to discuss the major elephant in the room. And what I'm talking about is the relationship that is mirrored in real life. In the movie, Steve Grayson is the driver and Kenny Donford is the manager. This mirrors the real-life relationship between Elvis and Tom Parker, because Elvis was, by most members of the Memphis Mafia, very generous and very caring. But by the end of Elvis's life, Parker, who was always a gambling habit, was now very deeply in debt, and he used Elvis's performances to fund his trips to the casino. Many people within the Memphis Mafia, Elvis's inner circle, genuinely believe that the reason Elvis died when and how he did was because Parker had pushed him beyond the breaking point while ignoring his personal issues to cover his own personal debt. And the plot of the movie mirrors this relationship almost perfectly, to the point that I'm wondering, could this be the first case of a movie that's biographical in retrospect? Maybe. I mean, it's not like this was as common knowledge as it is today, because the internet and all that stuff didn't exist. But it is kind of jarring knowing how and when Elvis died and knowing why he died. It's almost creepy, seeing how this movie folds out. But all in all things considered, at the end of the day, Speedway is a fun little movie. It has good realism, a great cast, and it's a fun little time killer. But while it does have its flaws, most of these flaws are not too overpowering. And the thing that always confuses me about this movie, the more you think about it, is why don't NASCAR fans talk about this more? Why does this not get brought up in terms of like good racing movies? You have two great movies in Speedway and Grease Lightning, which were both underrated gems. Both had great performances by an actor you wouldn't normally associate with stock car racing. Everything about them is good for the most part. These are underrated gems that never get talked about by anyone in terms of NASCAR or any other movies. I don't know why. I think that for the NASCAR fan base, a NASCAR movie starring Elvis Presley should be an automatic watch. Well, that about does it for 2022. The 2022 episodes of Driver Suit Blog are now over. Starting in January, we will come back with more Driver Suit Blog Radio, and I will start with some news next week. I'm Dave Farsley. Leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next year. Yeah, I know it's a bad joke, but when else can I use it? Leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you then.